Imagine looking at a ledger. Just a standard, dusty book of accounts, debits, credits, profit margins on spices, textiles, and maybe a little opium.
Pretty mundane stuff.
It's boring, right? And then, almost overnight, that ledger is thrown into a bonfire and replaced by the supreme law of a land housing millions of people.
That's a powerful image.
We are talking about one of the most dramatic corporate takeovers in human history, followed by a slow, painful, yet fascinating evolution of legal rights.
It is quite the image to start with.
Hmm.
You were referring, of course, to the shift from the East India Company's boardroom, where profit was king, to the British Parliament's floor, and eventually to the Constituent Assembly of India.
Exactly. We're traveling back to the ashes of 1857 today. We're going to trace the genealogy of the Indian Constitution, step by agonizing step, act by act, until we finally hit independence in 1947.
And this is something special.
It is. This is a special deep dive tailored specifically for the Simplified UPSC by PTP YouTube channel.
And for the learners tuning in, let's be clear about the mission here. This isn't just a history lesson where we memorize dates and, yawn. This is Chapter 19 of the Tamil Nadu Board History Class to 12 book, Decoded.
But we're going deeper.
Much deeper. We're looking at this purely through the lens of the UPSC exam. We've pulled data from previous year questions, specifically looking at the traps set in the 2013 and 2014 papers to show you how the examiners think.
That is the mission. We want to move beyond the what and get to the why. But before we jump into the revolt that started it all, I have a humble request for everyone listening. If you find value in this deep dive, please hit that subscribe button on the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel. We are on a mission to bring you super useful, high-density content, and your subscription is really the fuel for that engine.
And for those who are capable and want to support this educational initiative even further, there's a Patreon page. We want to give a massive, heartfelt shout-out to the current supporters.
Oh, absolutely.
You are the reason we can keep the lights on and the research this deep. It makes a huge difference.
It really does. Also, we want this to be a two-way street. Like the video and drop a comment on what nugget of information surprised you the most. Oh, and for the serious aspirants, do not miss the resources.
This part is important.
We have free notes with practice PYQs available on the public Telegram channel.
And if you want the treasure chest, I'm talking access to all videos in this series, organized premium notes, extra PYQs, and model mains answers, you need to get into the private Telegram library.
And how do they do that?
Just DM us on the public Telegram channel to join. It's that simple.
Okay, logistics done. Let's get into the meat of it. The year is 1858. The Great Revolt of 1857 has just been brutally suppressed. The smell of gunpowder is still in the air.
It's a tense, tense moment.
The British Empire looks at the East India Company and essentially says, "You're fired."
Essentially, yes. The Revolt of 1857 was the catalyst. But, the writing had been on the wall for a long time. The revolt exposed the fundamental weakness of a trading company trying to manage a massive political empire.
It just wasn't sustainable.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The administration was a mess, the army had mutinied, and the financial mismanagement was rampant. The British Crown realized they couldn't outsource an empire anymore. They had to take direct responsibility.
So enter the Government of India Act of 1858. This is the great shift. But let's look at the mechanics of this takeover. What actually changed in the power structure? Because for a farmer in Bengal, did it really matter if the tax collector worked for a company or a queen?
That's a great question. And on the ground, initially, maybe not much, but structurally, everything changed at the time. To understand 1858, you have to understand what it replaced.
Okay.
Before this, under Pitt's India Act, you had this bizarre dual government. You have the Court of Directors representing the company shareholders, the money guys.
Right.
And then you had the Board of Control representing the British government, the political guys.
Right, the double-headed monster. I remember that.
Exactly. And they were constantly at odds. It was inefficient. The 1858 Act abolished both of them. It swept the slate clean.
Just gone.
Wiped them out. In their place, the Act created a new position, the Secretary of State for India. Now, this is crucial for your understanding of the hierarchy. The Secretary of State was a member of the British cabinet.
Let's pause on that. Being a member of the cabinet means he sits in London, right? Not in Calcutta or Delhi.
Yes, absolutely. He sits in London, he is a member of Parliament, and most importantly, he is answerable to the British Parliament. This introduced for the first time a direct line of accountability.
So if there was a famine in Bengal or a riot in Bombay,
An MP in London could stand up in the House of Commons and question the Secretary of State, in theory at least.
that sounds like a significant upgrade in accountability.
In theory, yes. But in practice, it often led to what was called administration from the India office. The Secretary of State might never have visited India. He was relying on reports, on telegrams. He was thousands of miles away.
A very remote form of control.
Very.
Okay, so he's the boss in London. But who is running the show in Calcutta?
That would be the Governor General, but with a shiny new title. He was now called the Viceroy.
Viceroy. What does that actually mean?
The title Viceroy literally means the representative of the crown. It's a personal representative of the monarch. It added a layer of royal prestige, which was very effective in dealing with the princely states. They understood royalty.
And the man who found himself in this hot seat, the first one.
That would be Lord Canning. He was the Governor General during the revolt, and he transitioned to become the first Viceroy under the new act. A very tough job to have at that moment.
I can imagine. Did the Secretary of State work alone in London? That seems like a massive job for one person to oversee a subcontinent.
It was. So the act gave him a council, the India Council, consisting of 15 members to assist him. These were usually retired British officials who had served in India, the so-called India hands.
So they had experience on the ground.
They did, but the key thing to remember is the power center had shifted. The final word on policy now came from London, not Calcutta.
Now, alongside this act came a very famous document, the Queen's Proclamation of November 1st, 1858. I've heard this called the Magna Carta of the Indian people. That sounds like incredibly high praise for a colonial document. Is it justified?
It was intended to be pacifying. You have to remember the context blood had been spilled on a massive scale. The British needed to lower the temperature to reassure people.
Yeah.
Lord Canning read this out at a durbar in Allahabad. It was basically a damage control manifesto.
So what did it promise? What was the biggest promise?
For the princes, it was the promise of no further territorial extension. This was huge.
Why so huge?
Well, under Lord Dalhousie, before the revolt, the British were grabbing states left and right using the doctrine of lapse. If a king died without a natural heir, the British took the kingdom.
Right, I remember that.
The Queen's Proclamation essentially said, "We won't steal your kingdom anymore. We will respect your rights, dignity, and honor." It turned the princes from potential enemies into, well, loyal pillars of the empire.
A very clever move. That secures the princes. What about the common people?
She promised religious toleration. The British would stop interfering in ancient social and religious customs, which many believed was a cause of the revolt.
And the big one.
And, perhaps most famously, she promised equal treatment of subjects. The proclamation stated that our subjects, of whatever race or creed, be freely and impartially admitted to offices in our service.
That sounds like a meritocracy. If you're smart enough, you can be a judge. On paper, at least.
Exactly. And that is why it was called the Magna Carta. It gave the educated Indian middle class a legal handle to hold on to, a document they could point to.
But in practice?
In practice, we know the British had no intention of actually letting Indians into the high ranks of the civil service. They set up impossible age limits and held exams only in London. But legally, the promise was there.
And that gave early nationalists the ability to point to the proclamation and say, you are breaking your own Queen's word.
Precisely. It became a tool for constitutional agitation.
Before we move to the next phase, is there a specific exam trap here we should look out for, something UPSC aspirants might trip over?
Yes, absolutely. In the exam, they often test the specifics of the 1858 Act regarding titles and transfer of power. A common trap is confusing the High Commissioner with the Secretary of State.
Okay, what's the difference?
The Secretary of State comes in 1858. The High Commissioner, which we will get to, doesn't show up until 1919. They sound similar. They're both based in London, but they are from different eras with different functions. Don't mix them up.
Good tip.
Also, remember the hierarchy. The Viceroy reports to the Secretary of State, who reports to the British Parliament.
Got it. Okay, so the Crown is in charge. But running India is hard work. They realized they couldn't do it entirely without listening to some locals, or at least creating the illusion of listening.
An important distinction.
This brings us to Section 2, the Early Councils Acts. Let's start with 1861.
This is the beginning of what historians call the benevolent despotism phase. The 1857 revolt happened partly because the British had no ear to the ground.
They were caught completely by surprise.
Totally. They didn't know what the people were thinking until they were shooting at them.
Yeah.
So the 1861 Act was an attempt to add some local input. It expanded the Governor General's Executive Council from 4 to 5 members.
But the real change was in the legislative side, right? The lawmaking part?
Correct. The Viceroy could nominate between 6 and 12 additional members to his council for the purpose of making laws. The act said that at least half of these had to be non-officials. In practice, some of these were Indians.
Some of them. Who were they? Were they firebrand revolutionaries?
Hardly. Not even close.
Yeah.
They were the Raja of Benares, the Maharaja of Patiala, and Sir Dinka Rao.
So, royalty and loyalists.
Exactly. These were aristocrats, landowners. They weren't going to rock the boat. They were there to lend an air of Indian legitimacy to British laws.
But did they have any actual power? Could they stand up and say, hey, this tax is too high?
Absolutely not. And that's the key takeaway for the 1861 Act. It established the structure of a legislature, but it had zero democratic soul. These members could not discuss the budget.
Nothing on finances.
No. They could not ask questions about the administration. They were there to rubber stamp what the Viceroy wanted. It was legislative window dressing.
However, I recall reading that this act introduced something called the portfolio system. That sounds important.
Yes, and that is a critical administrative detail that often gets overlooked. Lord Canning introduced the portfolio system.
How did that work?
Before this, the council worked as a group on everything. Every file had to be seen by everyone. It was incredibly slow. Canning said, no, you take home affairs, you take military, you take law. Each member was in charge of a department or portfolio.
So it's like a cabinet.
Exactly. It turned the council into a cabinet system, which is the direct ancestor of our modern ministries. A huge step in administrative efficiency.
So fast forward 30 years. The Indian National Congress has been formed in 1885. The moderates, Dadabhai Naoroji, G.K. Gokhale, are pushing for more.
They're using constitutional means, petitions, speeches.
And this leads to the Indian Councils Act of 1892. This feels like a slightly bigger deal.
It is, and it's directly linked to the pressure from the early Congress. It's their first real, albeit small, victory. The 1892 Act increased the number of additional members again, this time to between 10 and 16.
Okay, more members. But did they get more power?
Yes. This is the massive upgrade. Members were finally allowed to discuss the budget.
Discuss but not vote on it.
Correct. They could discuss it, they could criticize it, and they could ask questions to the executive, though with severe limitations. They had to give 6 days' notice.
So they couldn't move a motion to change the budget?
No. But simply having the floor to criticize the financial policy was a weapon the moderates used effectively. Imagine Gokhale standing up and using data to show how British policy was draining India's wealth.
That's powerful.
It was. The speeches were recorded, printed in newspapers, and read by thousands. It turned the council from a private club into a public platform for agitation.
Now, the method of selecting these members in 1892 is interesting. The word election is still taboo.
Oh, they were terrified of that word.
Oh.
It implied popular sovereignty, which they were not ready to concede, so they used a workaround.
What was it?
The act said members would be nominated on the recommendation of certain bodies. So local bodies like universities, district boards, and municipalities could recommend a name.
And the viceroy would then nominate them.
Yes. So in practice, it was a form of indirect election, but legally, they kept the fiction of nomination, a very British compromise.
This connects to a previous year question, doesn't it? The trajectory of the movement.
It does. If you look at the 2014 prelims paper, there are questions surrounding the long arc of the freedom movement. Understanding the 1892 Act helps you contrast it with later demands.
For instance?
For example, in 1892, the moderates were thrilled just to discuss the budget. By 1929, and this is referenced in one of the questions, the Congress had moved to a demand for Purna Swaraj, or total independence.
It's a massive leap.
It's a huge shift in ambition. You need to see this as a gradient of rising expectations, and 1892 is that first small step on the ladder.
I like that comparison. From please let us speak in 1892 to get out in 1929.
Precisely. And the 1892 Act is that first small step where the British conceded that Indians had a right to at least know how their money was being spent.
Now let's talk about the personalities driving the bus in Section 3, the Viceroys. History and the UPSC exam loves to categorize these guys. We have the villains and the heroes.
It's a bit simplistic, but it's a useful shorthand for remembering their policies.
Let's start with the man who seemed determined to make everyone angry, Lord Lytton, from 1876 to 1880.
Lytton is the classic antagonist. If you want to understand why Indian nationalism surged, look at Lytton. He was an intellectual, a poet, but totally disconnected from the suffering of the people.
And he had this grand event, right? The Delhi Durbar.
The infamous Delhi Durbar of 1877. He organized this lavish spectacle to proclaim Queen Victoria as Empress of India.
Well, what was happening in the south?
A devastating famine was killing millions in the Madras region. The contrast between the feasting in Delhi and the starving in the Deccan was just, well, obscene. It was a PR disaster of epic proportions.
But his policies were worse.
Oh, yes. The Vernacular Press Act of 1878.
The Gagging Act.
Yes. It specifically targeted newspapers published in Indian languages. It allowed the government to confiscate their printing press if they published anything seditious without any judicial process.
But it didn't apply to English newspapers.
No, and that blatant racial double standard infuriated people. It was an attack on the growing voice of the Indian public sphere.
There's a famous story about a newspaper that outsmarted him, right?
There is. The Amrita Bazar Patrika newspaper. To avoid the act, they changed their language from Bengali to English, literally overnight. It's a legendary story of resilience and defiance.
That is fantastic. But then the pendulum swings. Lytton leaves, and we get Lord Ripon from 1880 to 1884. He's often called the Good Viceroy. Why?
Because he actually tried to reverse Lytton's damage. The first thing he did was repeal the Vernacular Press Act.
Okay, that's a good start.
But his biggest legacy, and this is a favorite topic for questions, is local self-government. He is known as the father of local self-government in India.
What was his vision there? What did he want to create?
He wanted to develop municipal boards and district boards with a majority of non-official members, presided over by a non-official chairman. He believed Indians needed to learn the art of administration, starting at the local level. It was meant to be a training ground for democracy.
And he had that massive fight with the British residents, the Ilbert Bill controversy.
That is a pivotal moment in the history of Indian nationalism.
What was the bill about?
The Ilbert Bill tried to do something very simple.
Right.
Allow senior Indian judges to preside over cases involving European offenders in court.
It seems basic. A judge is a judge, right? If you are qualified, your skin color shouldn't matter.
You'd think so. But the European community in India revolted. They called it the White Mutiny. They formed a defense association. They abused Ripon in the press. They threatened to boycott his dinners. They couldn't stomach the idea of a native judging a white man.
And what happened to the bill?
It was withdrawn and heavily diluted. Ripon was forced to back down.
That must have been a huge wake-up call for the Indian educated class.
It was the ultimate aha moment. It proved that no matter how educated, how loyal, or how qualified an Indian was, racial prejudice was the bedrock of British rule. It galvanized the formation of the Indian National Congress just a year or so later.
It taught them that you can't just rely on British fairness.
It taught them that if they wanted rights, they had to organize and fight for them.
Then we have Lord Curzon, 1899-1905, the efficiency expert, the man who loved order so much he broke things.
Curzon is a very complex figure. He was brilliant, incredibly hardworking, but also incredibly arrogant. He believed Indians were incapable of ruling themselves, and that he knew what was best for them.
What were some of his reforms?
He passed the Indian Universities Act of 1904, which reduced the autonomy of universities because he thought they were becoming factories for revolutionaries. He passed the Calcutta Corporation Act to reduce Indian influence in the city's administration. He was all about centralizing control.
But his headline act, the one everyone remembers, is the Partition of Bengal in 1905.
The event that set the country on fire. He divided the massive province of Bengal, ostensibly for administrative efficiency.
But that wasn't the real reason.
No. The real reason was to break the back of Bengali nationalism. He split the Hindu-majority West Bengal from the Muslim-majority East Bengal. It was a deliberate attempt to foster division.
Speaking of PYQs, there is a specific question about this in the 2014 paper, isn't there?
Yes, question 81 in that paper, it asks. The partition of Bengal made by Lord Curzon in 1905 lasted until, it's a timeline check.
Because it didn't last forever. The protests were just too strong.
Exactly. The protests were so intense, the Swadeshi movement, boycott of foreign goods, that the British eventually had to cave. The partition was abrogated, canceled by King George V at the Royal Durbar in Delhi in 1911.
So 1911 is the answer.
1911. But remember, while they reunited Bengal, they also did something else significant that year. They moved the capital of India from Calcutta to Delhi, a move to a more central and historically imperial location.
Okay, so Curzon's actions radicalized the movement. The moderates in Congress were losing ground to the extremists Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, Lala Lajpat Rai.
The British now needed a new strategy.
Divide and rule combined with carrot and stick. This brings us to Section 4, the Minto-Morley Reforms of 1909.
This is a constitutional turning point. for better or for worse. Lord Minto was the viceroy, John Morley was the Secretary of State. The carrot was expanding the legislative councils again. They increased the central council membership to 60.
And they finally let an Indian into the inner sanctum, right, the executive council.
Yes, this was a huge deal. The executive council was the cabinet, the real seat of power. Sachendra Prasanna Sinha, or S.P. Sinha, became the first Indian law member of the Governor-General's Executive Council. That was a glass ceiling shattered.
But then there's the poison pill you mentioned earlier, separate electorates.
This is crucial for every listener to understand. The act introduced a system where Muslim seats could only be voted for by Muslim voters.
Let's break that down. Why is this so controversial? Why not just reserve seats for Muslims?
It's a matter of incentives. If you have a reserved seat, say, for a Muslim candidate, but everyone in the district, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, everyone gets to vote for them, that candidate has to appeal to everyone. They have to talk about roads, water, things that unite people.
They have to be moderate.
Exactly. But if you have a separate electorate where only Muslims vote for a Muslim candidate, that candidate has zero incentive to care about Hindu interests. In fact, to win, they might need to be more radical, more communal, to prove they are the true protector of the faith.
So it creates a structural incentive for division.
That's the perfect way to put it. It institutionalized communalism. Instead of a voter thinking as an Indian citizen, they were now legally forced to think as a member of a religious community at the polling booth.
And this sowed the seeds of partition.
It's the first major legal step on that tragic road.
Why did the British do it?
It was a strategy called counterpoise. The British saw the Congress, which was predominantly Hindu at the leadership level, growing strong. They needed a counterweight. The Muslim League had been formed in 1906, and they sent a delegation to Minto the Simla deputation, asking for these special rights. Minto was more than happy to oblige because it fractured the national movement.
So 1909 was a mixed bag, a tiny step forward in representation, a giant leap backward in national unity.
A very tragic trade-off.
Now let's move to Section 5. The Montague-Chelmsford Reforms of 1919. The world has changed. World War I has happened. The Home Rule movement is buzzing. The British promise responsible government in the August Declaration of 1917.
The Government of India Act, 1919. This act is a favorite for exam setters because it introduces structural complexities that are easy to confuse.
Two big words to remember here, bicameralism and dyarchy. Let's unpack bicameralism first.
Bicameralism simply means two houses. For the first time, the 1919 Act set up a bicameral legislature at the center, the Council of States, which was the upper house, and the Legislative Assembly, the lower house.
So this is the grandfather of our current Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha.
It absolutely is. The basic structure was laid down here.
Okay, that's the center. But the real experiment was in the provinces, this thing called dyarchy. It sounds like a medical condition.
It was certainly a headache for the administrators. Dyarchy comes from the Greek diarch, meaning double rule. The act divided the provincial subjects into two lists, reserved and transferred.
Give us an example. How did this work in real life in, say, the Madras presidency?
Okay. Reserved subjects were the powerful ones. Law and order, the police, finance, land revenue. These were kept strictly under the control of the governor and his executive council, who were British and not responsible to the legislature.
They answered only to the governor.
Right. Then you had transferred subjects. These are the developmental ones. Education, health, agriculture, local government. These were given to Indian ministers who were elected from and responsible to the provincial legislature.
That sounds okay on the surface. Indians get to run health and education. That's what people care about.
But here is the catch, and this is why it failed so spectacularly. The ministers had responsibility, but no real power.
How so?
Imagine you are the Indian Minister for Education.
Yeah.
You want to build 50 new schools. That falls under your transferred subject.
Yeah.
But to build schools, you need money. Who holds the purse strings?
The governor? Because finance is a reserved subject.
Exactly. So you have to go cap in hand to the governor's council and beg for the budget. If the governor says, no, you can't build the schools, but who gets blamed by the public?
You do, the Indian minister.
Precisely. The voters see that the Indian minister failed to build schools. They don't see the British governor blocking the things behind the scenes. It was a system designed to give responsibility without authority.
Ah, so it was set up to fail, to
Right.
prove Indians couldn't govern.
Many historians believe so. It was unworkable. The British kept the power, the money, and the police, and gave the Indians the blame for poor services.
There's also the High Commissioner here, right? We mentioned him earlier as a potential point of confusion.
Yes. The 1919 Act created a High Commissioner for India in London. He was to look after Indian trade and agency functions, like buying railway parts or looking after Indian students. It was a small step towards treating India like a dominion, separating the commercial work from the political work of the Secretary of State.
This all connects directly to the Simon Commission, right?
Yeah.
The 1919 Act had a clause that it would be reviewed in 10 years.
It does. Connecting to our 2013 source paper, question 39 asks about the Simon Commission's recommendations. The commission was sent in 1927, a bit early, to review the 1919 Act. They looked at Dyarchy and basically said, "This is a disaster, scrap it."
So what did they recommend instead?
They recommended the abolition of Dyarchy in the provinces and the introduction of full provincial autonomy. They also suggested a federation of British India and princely states.
But the Simon Commission had its own massive drama.
Huge drama. It was an all-white commission, 7 members, all British, 0 Indians, to review the future of the Indian Constitution. It was seen as a massive insult.
So it was boycotted everywhere.
Everywhere. Everywhere Simon and his team went, they were met with black flags and chants of Simon go back. It completely united the Indian political spectrum against it.
This brings us to Section 6, the turning point, from 1927 to 1935. This period is incredibly intense. You have the Simon Commission boycott, the Round Table Conferences in London, the civil disobedience movement, and out of all this churning comes a blueprint. The Government of India Act, 1935.
This is the heavyweight champion of constitutional acts. It is the longest act ever passed by the British Parliament at that time. And if you read the Indian Constitution of 1950 today, a vast chunk of its administrative details are lifted directly from the 1935 Act.
So for any aspirant, this act is non-negotiable. You have to know it inside out.
Absolutely.
So what were the big changes? What's the headline feature?
First, it proposed an all-India federation. The idea was to unite the British Indian provinces and the princely states into one single federal unit.
That sounds ambitious. Did it happen?
No, it never came into existence. The princely states refused to join. They were afraid of losing their autonomy to a central federal structure with democratic elements. They looked at the Congress-led movements in British India and said, "No thank you, we like our thrones." So that part of the act remained a paper tiger.
But the provincial part of the act did happen.
Yes, and this is the second and most important feature: provincial autonomy. Remember Dyarchy, that failed experiment? The 1935 Act killed Dyarchy in the provinces.
So it's gone.
Gone from the provinces. Now, the provinces were given an autonomous status. The entire provincial administration, all subjects, were handed over to responsible ministers who were elected by and answered to the provincial legislatures.
Wait, did Dyarchy disappear entirely from the system?
No. And here's the deep dive nuance that trips people up. They took Dyarchy out of the provinces and moved it up to the center.
Ah, that's tricky.
Very. So now the federal subjects at the center were divided into reserved and transferred. The Governor-General kept defense and foreign affairs as reserved subjects, while other subjects were to be transferred to Indian ministers. But since the Federation never formed, this central Dyarchy wasn't fully operationalized.
The 1935 Act also gave us the lists, right? The division of powers.
Correct. The division of legislative powers into 3 lists: a federal list for the center, a provincial list for the provinces, and a concurrent list where both could legislate. This system is exactly what we use today in the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution.
But was this provincial autonomy real, or was there a catch like in 1919?
There was a catch, though it was smaller. The governors still had safeguards or special responsibilities. They could override the ministers if they felt law and order was threatened or to protect the interests of minorities.
So, not total freedom, but a lot more power than before.
Much more. It was enough power that the Congress, after some debate, decided to give it a shot and contest the elections.
So we have this massive act. Elections are held in 1937. The Congress sweeps the polls. They form ministries in most of the provinces. It feels like we are on the home stretch to independence.
It felt like that. For about 28 months, from 1937 to 1939, Indians were effectively running large parts of the country. It was a trial run for independence. They passed tenancy laws. They worked on education. They released political prisoners.
But then September 1939 hits.
Germany invades Poland. World War II begins.
And the Viceroy, Lord Linlithgow, declares India is at war with Germany without consulting a single Indian leader.
That was the deal breaker. It was a stark reminder of where the real power still lay. The Congress ministry said, "You can't just drag us into a war for democracy in Europe while denying it to us at home. You can't do this without our consent."
Well, they resigned.
They resigned en masse in protest in October 1939. And that act of protest triggered the final chaotic countdown to 1947.
This brings us to Section 7, the final countdown. The British are now desperate for Indian support in the war, so they start making offers. First up, the August offer of 1940.
This is from Viceroy Linlithgow. He basically said, help us fight the Nazis, and after the war we'll expand the Executive Council and set up a representative body to frame a constitution. He also vaguely mentioned Dominion status as the objective.
Gandhi wasn't impressed.
No. By this point, Dominion status was an outdated concept. Congress wanted full independence, Purna Swaraj. The offer was seen as too little, too late.
And this led to a new kind of protest.
Yes, the individual satyagraha. Gandhi didn't want to hamper the war effort with a massive mass movement yet. He was anti-fascist, after all. So he chose a symbolic protest. He selected individuals to make anti-war speeches, break the law, and get arrested.
Who was number one? The first person chosen.
Acharya Vinoba Phave was the first satyagrahi. Jawaharlal Nehru was the second. It was a brilliant strategy, keeping the flame of protest alive without causing chaos during a critical war phase.
But by 1942, the situation gets much more serious for the British.
Oh, yes. The Japanese are knocking on the door. They have swept through Southeast Asia. Singapore has fallen. Burma is falling. The war is at India's eastern frontier. The British get really nervous.
So they send a high-profile mission.
They send Sir Stafford Cripps to India, the Cripps mission. Cripps was a socialist, a member of the British War Cabinet, and a personal friend of Nehru. There was some hope for a breakthrough.
What did he propose?
He came with a concrete proposal. Help us now, and after the war we grant you full dominion status with the right to secede from the Commonwealth, and a constituent assembly to be formed immediately after the war.
That sounds like what they wanted, a constituent assembly, so why did it fail?
A couple big reasons. First, the timing. Everything was promised after the war. Gandhi famously called it a post-dated check on a crashing bank.
What did he mean by that?
He meant the British Empire itself looked like it was crashing. With the Japanese advancing, who knew if the British would even be in a position to honor their promises after the war? So why take a promise from a bank that's about to go bust?
And the second reason?
The second reason was that the Cripps proposal implicitly allowed provinces or princely states to opt out of the Indian Union. The Congress saw this as a blueprint for the balkanization of India. The seeds of Pakistan were right there in the proposal, so they rejected it. The Muslim League also rejected it for not explicitly creating Pakistan.
So Cripps fails. The frustration boils over. And in August 1942, Gandhi launches the big one, the Quit India movement.
Do or die. This was different from previous movements. It was intended to be the final struggle. It was largely leaderless because the British arrested all the top leaders, Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, on the very first day.
But the movement took off anyway.
The masses took over. It was spontaneous, widespread, and in many places violent. Police stations were burnt, railway lines were torn up, parallel governments were set up in places like Belia and Satara. It made it crystal clear to the British that they could not hold India by force anymore once the war was over.
There is a PYQ linkage here too, right? A direct cause and effect.
Yes, from the 2013 paper, question 40, Quit India movement was launched in response to. The answer is the failure of the Cripps proposals. It's a direct cause and effect relationship that you need to know.
The war ends in 1945. The Labour Party comes to power in Britain under Clement Attlee. This is a game changer.
A huge game changer. They are more sympathetic to Indian independence, and frankly, Britain is broke from the war and can't afford the empire anymore. They send the cabinet mission in 1946.
This is the end game.
This is it. The cabinet mission Pethick Lawrence, Stafford Cripps, he's back, and A.V. Alexander, came to figure out the peaceful transfer of power. Their main achievement. They laid down the plan for the formation of the Constituent Assembly that would write India's constitution.
Did they agree to the demand for Pakistan?
Explicitly, no. This is a very important point. The cabinet mission plan initially rejected the idea of a separate Pakistan. They thought it was impractical. Instead, they proposed a loose, three-tiered union.
How would that have worked?
They proposed groupings of provinces. Group A would be the Hindu-majority provinces, Group B would be the Muslim-majority provinces in the northwest, and Group C would be the Muslim-majority provinces in the east, Bengal, and Assam. The center would be very weak, controlling only defense, foreign affairs, and communications.
It was a last-ditch effort to keep India united, even if loosely.
It was. But trust had completely eroded by this point. The Muslim League accepted it, then rejected it. Congress had reservations about the compulsory nature of the groupings. When the negotiations broke down, Jinnah declared Direct Action Day on August 16, 1946.
And that led to?
Horrific communal riots starting in Calcutta and spreading across the country. The Great Calcutta Killings. Thousands died.
When blood is flowing in the streets, politics changes. The options narrow.
Exactly. Partition became a grim reality on the ground before it was a reality on paper.
And when all negotiations broke down, Ali sent the closer. The final viceroy, Lord Mountbatten.
The Mountbatten Plan of June 3, 1947. He came, took one look at the situation, the communal riots, the administrative deadlock, and concluded that partition was inevitable and had to be done quickly to avoid a full-scale civil war.
So his plan was just partition.
His plan was simple. Rapid transfer of power, but the country would be cut in two. Punjab and Bengal would be divided, and a boundary commission under Sir Cyril Radcliffe would draw the lines.
And that leads to the Indian Independence Act of 1947.
The final legal curtain call. It was passed by the British Parliament in July 1947. It created two independent dominions, India and Pakistan. It declared the lapse of British paramountcy over the princely states. And on August 15, 1947, the ledger we talked about at the beginning was finally closed.
But the map of the newly independent India looked like Swiss cheese. You had these 566 princely states who were technically free to do whatever they wanted. Paramountcy had lapsed. They could join India, join Pakistan, or theoretically stay independent.
That brings us to Section 8, Integration and the Aftermath. And this is the story of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, the Iron Man of India, and his brilliant secretary, V.P. Menon. It is arguably the greatest feat of diplomatic integration in modern history.
They had a very short window to get it done.
A tiny window. They used a combination of patriotism, persuasion, and pressure, the famous carrot and stick policy, to get the vast majority of states to sign the instrument of accession before the deadline.
But there were three big holdouts, three major headaches.
Junagadh, Hyderabad, and Kashmir.
Let's take them one by one. Junagadh.
Junagadh was a small state in Gujarat with a Hindu-majority population. But its ruler, the Nawab, was Muslim, and he wanted to join Pakistan, which made no geographical sense.
So what happened?
The people revolted. India blocked supplies. Eventually, a plebiscite, a public vote was held. The people overwhelmingly chose to join India.
Okay, one down, then Hyderabad.
The toughest one. Hyderabad was a massive, wealthy state right in the heart of India. The Nizam wanted to be independent. He had a private army, a brutal paramilitary force called the Razakars, terrorizing the people.
So diplomacy didn't work.
Patel waited, tried to negotiate. Polo in September 1948. In a few days, it was over. Hyderabad was integrated.
And finally, the most complex one, Kashmir.
Kashmir had the opposite problem of Junagadh. A Hindu ruler, Maharaja Hari Singh, and a majority Muslim population. He was indecisive. He wanted to stay independent, the Switzerland of Asia.
But events forced his hand.
Exactly. Pathan tribesmen, backed and armed by the new state of Pakistan, invaded in October 1947. They were burning and looting their way towards Srinagar. Hari Singh panicked and asked India for help.
And what was India's condition?
Nehru and Patel said, "We can't send our troops to a foreign country. You have to legally accede to India first." So Hari Singh signed the instrument of accession on October 26, 1947. Kashmir became legally part of India, and Indian troops were airlifted to Srinagar just in time to save the city.
So even after this incredible integration, the internal map of India looked weird. We had these different categories of states, like Part A, Part B, Part C. It wasn't until 1956 that we got the map we recognize today.
The States Reorganization Act of 1956. This was based on the report of the Fazal Ali Commission. It accepted the principle of creating states based on language.
That wasn't the original plan of the Congress leadership, though.
No, not at all. The JVP committee, with Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, and Pattabhi Sitharamaiah, had rejected the idea of linguistic states right after independence. They feared it would promote regionalism and break the country apart.
So what changed their minds?
A tragedy. The death of Patti Sriramulu, a Gandhian freedom fighter who died after a 56-day hunger strike demanding a separate state for Telugu speakers Andhra. His death led to widespread riots, and the government was forced to concede. Andhra was created in 1953, the first linguistic state, and once the floodgates opened, there was no going back. The 1956 Act redrew the map to give us Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, and the other states we know today.
It is an incredible journey, from the autocratic rule of a company to a series of flawed constitutional experiments to finally a democratic republic with a self-made constitution.
And that's the takeaway. The Constitution of India wasn't written in a vacuum. It wasn't just brainstormed in a few months in 1946. It stands on the debris and the foundations of the 1858 Act, the 1909 communal mistakes, the 1919 Dyarchy experiments, and most heavily on the administrative blueprint of the 1935 Act.
Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was the Indian Constitution.
Absolutely. And for you, the listener, the next time you read Article 1 or the 7th schedule of the Constitution, remember, you are looking at the legacy of a struggle that spanned 90 years. Every clause has a history.
What a ride! We hope this deep dive helped you connect the dots, not just for the exam, but for your understanding of how modern India was forged.
Before we sign off, a humble reminder. If this content helped you visualize the timeline, if it made sense of these complex acts, please subscribe to Simplified UPSC by PPP on YouTube. It really helps the algorithm find other learners like you.
And if you are in a position to support us financially, please check out the Patreon. Every little bit helps us keep researching and recording these deep dives.
Don't forget the Telegram Treasure Trove, the public channel for the free notes and today's PYQ references, and the private library for the premium organized experience. Just DM us on the public channel to get in.
Like the video, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway. Maybe it was the post-dated check or the story of the Amrita Bazaar Patrika. And please share this with a fellow aspirant.
Keep questioning, keep analyzing.
And keep diving deep. We'll see you in the next one.